Hello, my dear Franken friends, and welcome to Spookyou, your one-stop shop for all things ghastly and ghoulish. I'm your host, Barnabas Vixen. How horrible of you to join us. Curl up, invite your friends, and by all means, make sure those lights are out. That way it's harder to tell what may or may not be lurking around you. There's nothing like a good mystery, am I right? Tonight will feature a singular tale of devilish design curated by those wicked weavers of woe. And without further ado, allow me to pass the reins on over to our vivacious voiceover virtuoso, Trey Falco, for tonight's sinister story. Please keep all limbs and side covers at all times. We wouldn't want anything to go missing now, would we?
I was off the next 2 days. I didn't let them go to waste by staying in my apartment or hanging out with my friends. Instead, I began to search. I wandered the city up and down the sidewalks, through parks and parking lots, pretending to browse in shops and department stores. I took the subway from one end of the town to the other and then back again. I was watching people. Everyone I saw, I studied them carefully, trying to be discreet. I watched the crowds of pedestrians on the sidewalks, the commuters who rode the subway, the young trophy wives and career women who went shopping at the more upscale department stores, the bohemian artists and lovers seated at the outdoor cafes, the people enjoying their day in the park. Indian summer had arrived and it was unreasonably warm. The people dining in the fast food restaurants where I went to eat my meals. I watched everyone I saw, carefully studying their faces for the slightest flicker, the slightest discrepancy. I tried to appear casual, indifferent. I imagined that, to most people, I had the look of your usual fish-out-of-water small-town tourist newly arrived in town and just seeing the city for the first time. I spent that entire first day doing that, and when it got dark, I returned to my apartment having learned nothing. I wondered again if I might just be imagining all of this. And I fell into a troubled sleep. The next day, I repeated the process. It was a gorgeous, bright fall day, the trees in the park lush with the dazzling colors of autumn foliage, red, orange, yellow. But I took no notice. The novelty of being able to see again had worn off, and I was on a mission. I began to lose hope as the day drifted towards early evening and the sun began to set. I hadn't encountered anything out of the ordinary, not one person whose face had given even the subtlest indication that they weren't what they appeared to be. I was just about to give up and return home when it happened.
Hello, listener. Barnabas here, and I'd like to take a moment to talk to you about something that's very near and dear to our hearts here at Spookyou. Blood. That succulent scarlet, the crimson cascade of delicious viscera. We can't get enough of it, and we hear you have plenty. That's why we've partnered with Dr. Acula's Blood Bank. Doc Acula is a medically licensed professional specializing in the removal and storage of that sweet life juice that flows through your veins. With your contribution, you'll be able to feed hundreds of starving vampirites with a single donation. And think of the tax write-off. Am I right? Call today for your free consultation and see what you can do to help your community. Don't forget to bring some form of identification, proof of residency. That way we know which community vault to file away your precious cargo, and a notarized copy of your most recent will. Consultation usually takes a few minutes, while your donation will last a lifetime. Oh, Dr. Acula's Blood Bank. Proudly supporting impoverished vampire communities for over 3,000 years. Thank you for allowing us to get that message off our chest and implant it into your prefrontal cortexes. We now return you to your stories.
A man was walking down the sidewalk on the other side of the street, going in the opposite direction. He was a young guy, probably mid-20s, and had the rakish good looks and fashion of your typical rich playboy, leading a carefree lifestyle of casual debauchery. A casual Armani suit, shirt unbuttoned at the throat to display a gold chain, matching Rolex on one wrist. The kind of pampered, entitled scumbag who lived in a penthouse and survived off Daddy's trust fund, and always had cocaine residue around his nostrils and spent his nights in clubs picking up women he would never see again after the next morning. I gave him a cursory glance, and his face rippled. My heart skipped a beat. His face wavered, distorting before transforming into that black, formless void I knew so well. His soulless red eyes glowed in the near darkness. He continued on his way down the sidewalk. I stood there for a moment, feeling a brief flicker of indecision. Then I crossed the street and began to follow after him. He walked unhurriedly, but purposefully, seemingly with some destination in mind. I tracked him from a cautious distance behind, careful to avoid detection. I followed him for over an hour as the sun finished setting and nightfall descended. The streetlights came on automatically. The crowds of pedestrians gradually dried up, and the streets became less populated. I followed him, or rather, it, to the very outskirts of the city, into the industrial district, warehouses and factories surrounding us, smokestacks towering to the night sky, colossal black shapes against a backdrop of navy blue sky dotted with stars. The streets became increasingly deserted until it was just the two of us, and an occasional wino huddled around a fire drum, none of whom paid us any mind. The area became more rundown and dilapidated the further we walked. The street littered with trash, burned out cars on the curbs, brick walls covered with spray-painted gang graffiti. Some of the buildings were long abandoned, their windows boarded up, except for those that had been broken into by squatters and junkies, looking for a place to shoot up. A lot of the streetlights had been smashed out and it was much darker here. I became scared, not just because of the strange entity I was pursuing. This was a bad part of town to be in during the day, and here I was, smack dab in the middle of it at night. I scanned my surroundings cautiously, eyeing any potential hiding places in the thick shadows where I half expected to be ambushed any second by a mugger or a drug addict or a gang. At last, my quarry stopped, about 50 yards ahead of me, and turned down an alleyway between a meatpacking plant and a half-burned-down warehouse, disappearing from view. I stopped there, debating with myself if I should continue after him. It could be a trap. Maybe he had caught on that somebody was following him. Part of me wanted to turn around and go home, to just forget about the whole thing. Part of me didn't want to know the answer to this mystery, to just leave it alone and resume living my average, everyday life. But I had already come too far. I had to know. I went to the mouth of the alley, walking as quietly as possible, and peered in. At first, I was confused by what I was seeing. 30 feet away, the young man thing was standing with its back to me, holding a young girl in a tight lover's embrace. They at first appeared to be kissing, but then I noticed that their mouths were not actually touching. The thing had its mouth, or rather, the empty black space where its mouth should have been, about 3 inches away from the girl's parted lips. It appeared to be hyperventilating, sharp, rapid intakes of breath. But he didn't seem to be exhaling, only inhaling. I can't explain it any better than that. It looked like he was performing mouth-to-mouth resuscitation in reverse, and instead of blowing air into the girl's lungs, he was sucking air out. Then I saw the expression on the girl's face, a frozen look of pure, helpless terror. She seemed to be paralyzed in the arms of the thing that held her. As I watched, she went slack, going limp in its arms as if she had passed out. It let her go and she dropped to the pavement like a sack of potatoes. I was so dumbstruck with confusion and shock, I just stood there transfixed, instead of ducking out of sight. The thing in the casual Armani suit turned to leave, and stopped in its tracks, its burning red gaze locked upon me. For a long, seemingly endless moment, neither of us reacted. We just stared at each other. Fleetingly, I felt an absurd, insane sense of awkward embarrassment, the way you might feel when you walk in on someone doing something private that you shouldn't be seeing. Then the thing spoke to me, and its voice was completely ordinary and human. The slightly anxious voice of a man in his 20s with a trace of panic that I knew was totally bogus. "Hey man, you better call 911 quick. I think this chick's having a heart attack or something." I was bewildered by this for a second, and then it dawned on me that the creature wasn't yet aware that I could see past its facade and knew it wasn't human. I stared at it, wide-eyed, and asked in a low, nearly strengthless voice, "What are you?" Its body noticeably tensed, and I think it understood at that moment that I could see through its deception. "What the fuck are you?" I asked it again. It didn't answer me. Instead, it let out an unearthly, high-pitched howl and suddenly charged at me, moving with shocking speed, hurling towards me like a bullet. Part of my brain told me to run and flee, but I didn't listen. I acted purely on instinct, not pausing to analyze my actions. I grabbed a 4-foot length of rusty iron pipe from a heap of junk beside me, and as the thing closed in, I swung at its head. The pipe connected solidly with its head, with a thwack sound, and the shadow-faced thing tumbled to the ground at my feet. In a burst of frantic, terrified adrenaline, I swung the pipe into its head over and over in a wild frenzy. I felt blood spatter on my face. When I finally stopped, sometime later, I let the pipe fall from my hands and clang to the ground. It lay there, motionless, covered in blood, and I knew it was dead. I stood there, gasping over its body, and then stepped over it and approached the girl to see if I could help her. She lay there, already pale, her eyes staring dully up at the night sky, not breathing. I could tell, without having to check, that she was dead. She looked very young, maybe 16 at the most, and was pretty with bleached blonde hair, but at the same time had a certain harshness, a worn quality to her face, as if she had been prematurely aging from a tough life on the streets. She was wearing high heels, a short leather miniskirt, and a fishnet top with no bra underneath. And I had a good idea what her profession had been. I went back to the mouth of the alley, stepping over the corpse of the thing that had killed her to leave. And as I glanced down at it, I felt a fresh sense of horror rising within me. The thing's face had reverted back to that of the young man I had originally seen. A perfectly normal, human face, albeit covered in blood. Glazed eyes opened in shock, mouth agape, as if he had been trying to scream or call for help when he had died. His skull had been split open from the force of the bludgeoning I had given him, and blood and a pink, pulpy substance I knew had to be brain matter was slowly leaking out of his head and forming a puddle on the pavement. Gagging, trying not to throw up, I fled the alley and ran off into the night.
Welcome back, my darling deviants. Well, tell me, did you enjoy that twisted tale? Of course you did. I knew you had that air about you, that hunger for the horrific and the macabre. So, did we spook you? If not, then file a complaint with our complaint department detailing all accounts of non-spookiness you found in this video, and we'll get back to you in 2 to 3 millennia. Give or take a business eon or two. However, if you've enjoyed what you've just heard this evening, then make sure you leave a like on this video and annihilate that subscribe button. Such a small act of obedience is exactly what we need to put the food on the table around here. There's only so many days we can have refried kidney and toe jam hash before I'm absolutely sick of it. Spoiler alert, that ship sailed long ago. Now, I must bid you adieu. I've many things to take care of, and this outro is eating into my day off. Run along now. Have no fear, we'll be here every Tuesday and Thursday to bring you another terrible tale. Go forth, my ghastly gang, and stay spooky.